This is the smallest CGM sensor ever made. It has exceptional accuracy with almost no false alerts, a 365-day lifespan, and you can make it invisible anytime you want. It's a long-term solution for the everyday frustrations of traditional CGM. At least that's what it says on the Eversense website. But is this CGM really that good? Well, after 6 months of using one of these, I'm finally ready to talk about my experience. In this video, I'll cover the key pros and cons of the Eversense CGM, how accurate and reliable it is, and how it compares to other CGMs I tested before. This will be a longer video because I just have so much to share, but please feel free to skip to the topic you're interested in using the timestamps down below. Oh, and I was not hired or sponsored by anybody to make this content. I paid for everything myself, and I'll give you my honest opinion. Let's go. And we need to start by taking a closer look at the Eversense sensor. This bad boy is really tiny, 18mm long and only 3.5mm in diameter, which is about the size of a small pill. What I'm showing you right now is just a mock-up, because the actual sensor I'm using is hidden under my skin, right here on my upper arm. My doctor placed it there 6 months ago during a short procedure in his office. And the procedure itself was very smooth. It didn't hurt at all, and I captured everything on camera. You'll be able to see the actual footage of the insertions, and I'll share all the details a bit later in this video. Now, the most unique thing about the sensor is that it lasts a very long time. When Eversense was first created, it lasted 90 days. The Eversense E3, which is the version I tested, lasted for 180 days. But just recently, a new version, Eversense 365, was launched, and this one lasts the entire year. Meanwhile, Dexcom and FreeStyle Libre are busy patting themselves on the back for increasing their sensor lives for 15 days, which I find a bit funny. But let's move on. The next part of the Eversense system we need to talk about is the detachable transmitter, which sits on my arm just above the implanted sensor. While the sensor is placed under my skin, taking the glucose readings from the interstitial fluid, the transmitter powers the sensor and wirelessly sends all my glucose information to an app on my phone every 5 minutes, as long as my phone is within 25 feet distance. And yes, it works with both iOS and Android phones. But back to this transmitter, because there is a lot more you need to know about it, including what happens when you press this little button here. The transmitter has an oval shape with a smooth surface, which I really like because it doesn't catch on things. It is water resistant, so you can shower with it, but I usually take it off whenever I take a shower or go for a swim. Although it looks a bit bulky, I was surprised how light it is. When I put it on my arm, I immediately forgot that it's there. Still, with almost 2 inches in length, the Eversense wearable is about the size of Dexcom G6, not exactly tiny. As you can see here, it's also noticeably bigger than the original FreeStyle Libre, and when we compare it to Dexcom G7 or FreeStyle Libre 3, Eversense is not even close. But there is a good reason why. The Eversense transmitter can do a lot more than FreeStyle Libre or Dexcom. Let me show you. For starters, the Eversense transmitter can vibrate, which means you can get customized on-body alerts when your blood sugar is trending too low or too high. Did you hear that? This is so much better than traditional CGM alerts that go only to my phone. Because when I sleep and my phone is on vibrate, the alerts never wake me up. I sleep right through them. On the other hand, when I turn my alert sounds on, they do wake me up, but they also wake up the whole family. Not ideal. The Eversense on-body alerts are so much better because they do wake me up, but they don't wake up anybody else. Another cool thing about the on-body alerts is that when I go out for a quick walk, I don't need to bring my phone with me, and I still get alerted by the CGM when needed. By the way, when an alert is active, not only the transmitter vibrates, there is also a little red light that comes off. You can snooze any alert by pressing the button or acknowledging the alert in the app, and the light turns green. This feature is cool, but there is a little complaint I have. See, the system has different vibration patterns for different events. Longer vibrations for high and shorter vibrations for low, for example. But sometimes when I'm busy, I can feel the vibration, but I'm not 100% sure which one it was. Am I going high or am I going low? And there really is no way to check except looking at my phone and clicking through a bunch of screens. So Eversense, if you are listening, here's an idea. How about using more colors? You could do red for low blood sugar, yellow for high blood sugar, and blue for anything else. This would be super helpful. Now, the next Eversense feature I want to talk about is pretty amazing. Have you ever ripped off your CGM sensor by accident? Well, I have. I bumped into door frames and I knocked my sensor off while taking off my t-shirt or backpack. It happened quite a few times. Now when this happens with FreeStyle Libre or Dexcom, you pretty much lose the sensor because you can't put it back on. But knocking off the Eversense transmitter is not an issue. You can take this thing off and put it back on as often as you want. No matter if it's just to experience a naked shower without your CGM or for some wild adventures in your bedroom. The Eversense transmitter is attached to your skin with these double-sided silicone patches. One side of the patch sticks to the transmitter and the other sticks to your skin. The patches come in transparent or white color, and what's really cool about them is that they are very sensitive to my skin. They don't leave any filthy adhesive residue and they cause absolutely no skin irritation. Now, one thing you need to watch out for when placing the patch with the transmitter is that it sits right on top of the implanted sensor. The recommended way to do this is to use the placement guide in the app, which shows you the signal strength and help you correctly position the transmitter. To be honest, I don't always use the placement guide because I noticed that I can feel the sensor under my skin with my fingers, and I simply place the middle of the patch right above it. And it works for me. The only thing I don't love about these patches is that they are quite big, but I figured that I can just grab a scissor and cut out the extra parts I don't need. I can actually cut the patch down to half of its initial size, and it still sticks to my arm really well. Now, whenever I take the transmitter off, I usually turn it off as well. Otherwise, it starts buzzing, letting me know that it lost the connection to the sensor, and that's pretty annoying. Speaking of taking the transmitter off, you actually need to do that regularly, because it needs charging. Officially, the battery in the transmitter lasts 24 hours, but it's not exactly true. From my experience, the battery can actually last for 2 full days, so 48 hours. But when the battery level drops to 10%, it will start bombarding you with quite annoying alarms. So I actually ended up charging it every 36 hours or so. But the recommended procedure is to charge the transmitter daily. Most people do it when they're taking a shower. By the way, one of my friends who uses Eversense once told me that the most annoying thing about Eversense is that you need to take a shower every day. Never mind. What I like about Eversense is that I get a new patch every day as part of my package, so I can always put the transmitter back on with a fresh patch. To charge a transmitter from 0 to full charge takes about 15 minutes, but from my experience, charging 10 minutes per day is more than enough. By the way, the transmitter lifetime is 13 months. After that, it dies and you need to get a new one. Now, I have to honestly say that needing to charge the transmitter is quite a big downside of the system. Whenever I'm on the move, it's just one more extra charger I need to carry. On the other hand, I don't need to worry about carrying replacement sensors, which I had to do with Dexcom and Libre, which is a plus. But still, the Eversense E3 charger is a bit bigger than it needs to be, in my opinion. It has this cradle that you need to put the transmitter in, so if you forget this piece at home, you're screwed. But the good news is that the new version, Eversense 365, has a USB slot directly in the transmitter, so you'll be able to get rid of this nonsense. Now I won't be able to charge it. The next important aspect of the Eversense system that I want to talk about is accuracy. Over the last 6 months, I took many pictures of all the finger pricks I did and how Eversense readings compared to my glucometer. And I'm happy to report that I was impressed with the results. This CGM has been very accurate and extremely reliable for me. It's been more reliable than any other CGM I tested before. Seriously. Now, before I tell you why I think it was so reliable, I want to show you how Eversense compares to FreeStyle Libre and Dexcom on the paper when it comes to accuracy. A common benchmark used in clinical studies to evaluate accuracy of CGM is a mean absolute relative difference, or MARD. The lower the MARD, the more accurate the CGM. FreeStyle Libre 3, for example, has a MARD of 7.9%. Dexcom G7 has a MARD of 8.2%, and Eversense E3 has a MARD of 8.5%. Based on these numbers, Libre and Dexcom should be slightly more accurate. But in real life, these percentages don't really matter that much. Anything below 10% is good enough for me. The rest is just noise and marketing. Now, what really does matter to me is if I can rely on the glucose number the system is showing me at any point in time. A major issue I had with traditional CGMs is that sometimes I lie on my sensor in my sleep. The pressure I put on the side can lead to false low readings, aka compression lows. What's really cool about Eversense is that it hasn't given me a compression low like ever. I can't quite explain why, but even if I sleep on the sensor, these fake lows just don't happen. Another reason why I think Eversense has been so accurate and reliable is that I regularly calibrate it to my blood sugar readings from a glucometer. I'll show you how exactly I do that in a second, but first we need to talk about the elephant in the room, the insertion process. And look, I'm pretty sure you're thinking, Tom, all these things you're saying about Eversense sound good, but why on earth would I put something under my skin? Why would I let someone cut to my skin. And I get it, I felt exactly the same way for a long time. But all my friends who had used Eversense before told me that the insertion is not a big deal and that I should give it a shot. That gave me some reassurance, but still, when the insertion day came, I can tell you I was feeling pretty anxious. And that's why in the next section I want to show you the whole procedure step by step and share exactly what I felt. The first thing the doctor did was that he marked up the area where the sensor will be placed. Then he disinfected the area and gave me an injection, because the rest of the procedure is done under local anesthesia. I did feel the needle and the numbing medication going in my arm, but the injection turned out to be the only slightly uncomfortable part of the insertion. After that, I felt literally nothing. There will be a little blood in the next clip, so if that bothers you, you might want to look away for a second. The doctor then used a scalpel and made a small incision on my arm. And then he used this blue tool to make a little pocket under my skin, where the sensor was going to be placed. The actual implant is done with this insertion tool, which had been preloaded with the sensor, and the doctor simply released the sensor under my skin. After that, he held pressure for a couple minutes for the bleeding to stop, and then he put on the Steri-strips and a Tegaderm patch to close the insertion. By the way, the sensor is only cleared for the placement on the upper arm, and most of them are placed in quite a small area between the shoulder and the triceps muscle. But I had mine placed a little bit more to the back of my arm, a bit higher than where I normally put my disposable CGM sensors. Now, normally the insertion is supposed to take less than 5 minutes, but I have to say that in my case, it took a lot longer than that. It turned out that I actually have pretty thick skin, so the doctor had to make a little bit bigger cut and used a little bit more force than usual to get the sensor in. He doesn't do that very often, and the fact that my camera guy was filming everything made the whole situation a bit more stressful for him, which is understandable. In total, it probably took around 15 or 20 minutes to get everything done. Still, it didn't hurt at all, and I wouldn't mind going through this again. Now, here is how everything looked 1 hour after the insertion. This photo was taken 4 days after the insertion, and this photo was taken 10 days after the insertion, when the Steri-strips came off. By that time, the wound was fully healed. By the way, I recommend keeping the Steri-strips on as long as possible, until they come off on their own, so that the wound can heal really well for you. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that you will need to keep the wound dry and clear for 5 days after the insertion. I could shower, but I couldn't take a bath or go swimming. I was also recommended not to do any weightlifting for the next 5 days. Right after the insertion, the sensor goes through a 24-hour warm-up period, so you won't receive any readings on your first day. I personally used this time to download and set up the Eversense app on my phone and connected my transmitter. Exactly 24 hours after the insertion, the system prompts you to attach the transmitter. I did that right away, and about 10 minutes later, it asked me to do a finger prick and enter my glucose value to calibrate the sensor for the first time. During the initialization phase, I actually had to complete 4 calibrations, each at least 2 hours apart, all within 36 hours. It probably goes without saying that I didn't love the initial calibration cycle, but once I got through it, things got a lot easier. During the first 21 days, I had to calibrate twice a day, and for the remaining 159 days, I only had to calibrate once a day. Now, of course, the fact that the Eversense sensor needs to be regularly calibrated is annoying, especially if you miss your calibration window and need to go through the initialization process again, which I had to do, by the way. But from my experience, I can say that calibrating the sensor regularly at the right time led to very accurate readings. The best time to calibrate for me turned out to be early in the morning, but you can do it pretty much any time when your blood sugar is stable. As you can see in this table, during my 180 days with the sensor, I had to calibrate about 230 times, which I honestly think it's a price worth paying for very reliable readings. The good news is that with the new Eversense 365, you only need to calibrate weekly, which leaves us with only 67 calibration over a full year, including the initialization phase. And that's a really nice upgrade. Now, another thing we need to talk about is what happens when the sensor expires. I got a reminder on my phone the other day that my sensor is due for replacement. We are 6 months after the insertion, and the scar on my arm is hardly noticeable. And I have to say that the sensor under my skin didn't bother me at all. The only time I thought I could feel it was a couple days after insertion when I had a light sensation in my arm. But it quickly disappeared and it never came back, so I think it might just have been my mind playing tricks on me. Now, one thing we have to keep in mind is that the doctor will need to cut again in the same spot to take the sensor out. So hopefully the healing will go just as well as it did for the first time. Now, my understanding is that the official procedure is to place a new Eversense sensor to a new site on the other arm. But I heard from a few friends that they used the same site repeatedly to avoid additional cuts and additional scars. Not saying that's what you should do, just what I heard. Next up, we need to talk about the Eversense app. I know most of you don't love watching me tap around the screen, so I'll keep this brief. But it's important to cover this because, well, the app isn't terrible, but the UI definitely lacks the elegance of FreeStyle Libre or Dexcom. There is a standard glucose tab with your current glucose number, trend arrow, and your glucose graph. You can zoom in and out, but can somebody explain to me why the glucose number is so huge and not in the center? And why do these two numbers here overlay, which makes it impossible to read them? You need to fix this, Eversense. Now, to be fair, the app probably has all the features and information you will need, but it just doesn't look great. One little detail I like is that you can just tap anywhere on the screen to log events like meals, insulin, or exercise. Another plus are these detailed reports. They offer more data points and insights than Dexcom or Libre, which I found really useful. But the one thing many of you are probably interested in is the alert settings. Eversense has the standard high and low alerts, but unfortunately, high alerts level can only be set at 185 milligrams per deciliter or higher. I couldn't set it to 150 or 160, which is what I was used to. And similar goes for lows. I can only set it to 60 or 65 milligrams per deciliter. I cannot set it to 80 or 70. Eversense, if you are watching this, please take away these unnecessary limitations and give us more flexibility with the alerts. We need that. Now, to be honest with you, when I saw that restriction for the first time, I was pretty mad. But then I found a solution to this problem. Eversense also has predictive alerts that will alert you at a certain time before you reached your high or low level. You can set this time to 10, 20 or 30 minutes. With these on, the system alerts me before I get too high or too low. And this is pretty helpful because I can do something about it before it actually happens. By the way, Eversense does have rate of change alerts too, but I didn't really need them because the predictive alerts got the job done for me. For those of you who like to snooze the alerts, when you do that with Eversense, alarms come back every 30 minutes until your glucose returns to the normal range. The system also offers temporary profiles where you can change the alarm levels temporarily for up to 36 hours to get rid of the alerts completely if you want to. Before I share my final verdict on Eversense, I want to talk about 6 more things that I noticed. These are not talked about a lot, but I think they're quite important. Number 1, if you're getting your sensor inserted for the first time, I would recommend you to go with an experienced doctor who's done this many times before. I'm sure this will help your first time less stressful than mine. Number 2, Eversense is the only CGM sensor approved for using during an MRI. When you go through a scan, you need to take off the transmitter, but you don't lose the sensor, which is definitely a plus. Number 3, just like with Dexcom or FreeStyle Libre, you can share your glucose data from your Eversense with up to 5 caregivers who can see your data real time on their smart devices. Number 4, the Eversense transmitter doesn't like heat. When I was on a boat sitting in the sun without a t-shirt, it overheated and stopped taking readings. I had to put my t-shirt back on and keep the transmitter in a shade before it started working again. Number 5, if you or your doctor love to nerd out over your numbers like I do, then you can have all your data automatically uploaded to a web-based app called DMS. This app has all the graphs and reports you can think of. Number 6, the Eversense system sucks when it comes to integration. It works with Apple Health and Xtrip, but it doesn't talk to pretty much any insulin pumps or algorithms, not even do-it-yourself solutions. So if you need automated insulin delivery or if you like to use many third-party apps, you should probably stick with Dexcom. If Eversense CGM caught your interest, then you might be wondering, how can I get my hands on this bad boy? I'll get to that in a minute, but first I have a big favor to ask you. I'm not getting paid for making these detailed reviews, but if you get value out of my content and if you want to support what I do, then please go to patreon.com/type1talks and join my community. By doing that, you get direct access to me and all my bonus content. Places in my Patreon group are limited, so go ahead and join while you still can. So how much does the Eversense CGM cost and where exactly is it available? I live in Switzerland and 6 months of the Eversense E3, which is the 180-day version, cost around 1,400 Swiss francs, which is around 1,560 US dollars. That includes the sensor, the transmitter, the insertion procedure, and all the patches. My insurance didn't cover this completely, they covered a part of it, but your coverage will depend on your specific situation. As of today, all Eversense CGMs are only cleared for adults, and they're distributed by Essentia, which is a big player in the diabetes space. And that's why they're available not only in Switzerland, but throughout the US and select European countries. If you're in the US, you can already get the 365-day version, since FDA has approved it and it's been launched. In Europe, you can get the 180-day version, as we're still waiting for the CE mark. But the Eversense 365 should be coming later this year. Unfortunately, Eversense is currently not available outside the US and Europe. Now, before I tell you whether or not I'll continue using the Eversense CGM myself, I want to share a few thoughts on who should try this new CGM and who should stay away. If you're someone who's already using Dexcom, FreeStyle Libre, or any other traditional CGMs, and if you are happy with these solutions, I don't think there is a good reason for you to switch. But if you're using a traditional CGM and you are not happy, especially because you have issues like skin irritation, compression lows, sensors coming off, inaccurate readings on day one of each sensor, alerts not waking you up at night, then you should probably pay attention. At the end of the day, you will need to make a choice between a disposable 10, 14 or 15-day sensor and a sensor that can last a full year, with a removable transmitter that needs to be charged almost every day. The one thing I enjoyed the most about the Eversense was that I didn't have to do a side change for a long time, and I didn't have to deal with inaccurate CGM readings for a very long time. And that was really refreshing. Also, the option to take it off for certain activities was pretty nice. But the problem with that is whenever the transmitter is off, literally no readings are captured, and you will end up with a hole in your graph. Whether that matters or not to you, it's up to you to decide. Now, in my personal opinion, one of the key benefits of a CGM is that it integrates with an automated insulin delivery system in an insulin pump. And unfortunately, Eversense can't do that. And that's why I stick with Dexcom. The thing is, Eversense is not the only CGM on the market. The most popular competitors are FreeStyle Libre 3 and Dexcom G7. If you want to see me comparing these two sensors, just click on this video here and watch it next. Don't forget to join my Patreon, and I will see you next time. Ciao!